Keanu Reeves walked into a luxury car showroom hoping for a quiet experience. But what unfolded turned into a global lesson in respect, one the world will never forget. Before we dive in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe, we've got another moving story coming your way tomorrow. Keanu Reeves, one of Hollywood's most beloved figures, stepped quietly into an upscale car showroom. To him, it was just another normal day, but what was about to unfold would shift everything. Once the truth about who he was came to light, the outcome wasn't just surprising, it was unforgettable. It was a bright, calm morning in Los Angeles. The sky stretched wide and blue, as if it were inviting something remarkable to happen. Dressed modestly in his usual black leather jacket and faded jeans, Keanu moved through the streets unnoticed by many, though a few passers-by offered admiring glances. As always, he remained grounded, smiling politely, nodding at compliments, and never letting fame interfere with who he truly was. Halfway through his walk, he paused at a local cafe he had visited for years. The barista greeted him by name. "Morning, Oliver." "Hey, Keanu." "The usual?" "Yes, thanks," he replied with a soft smile. As his coffee brewed, Keanu's thoughts drifted. He'd been on a quiet mission lately, not a film or a role, but a personal idea. He was searching for something unique, something tied to his love for cars but also meant to serve a deeper purpose. Perhaps a classic vehicle he could restore and later donate, or use to honor something bigger than himself. With the warm cup in hand, he resumed his walk. His destination? A renowned luxury dealership known for rare and high-end cars. That's where he hoped he'd find the one. As he entered the polished glass doors, the contrast hit immediately. Gleaming marble floors, chrome finishes, plush carpets, and the rich aroma of new leather filled the room. Elegantly dressed salespeople glided between vehicles and clients in designer suits. Keanu, in his simplicity, hardly registered on their radar, almost invisible. Almost. A few curious stares flicked his way, followed by quiet whispers. Keanu didn't react. His eyes were fixed on a vehicle tucked in the back corner, a vintage masterpiece that seemed to glow under the showroom lights. The curves, the deep paint, the heritage, it had every quality he had been looking for. With steady steps, he approached a nearby salesman scrolling on his phone. "Hi, could you tell me more about this model?" Keanu asked, voice calm and respectful. The man barely looked up. "Someone will be with you shortly," he muttered before walking off, never meeting Keanu's eyes. Keanu stood there, unfazed but not unmoved. He gently furrowed his brow, a subtle sign of growing discomfort. Still, he remained focused on the car, taking in each detail. But the environment around him had shifted. Not through actions, but through judgmental glances. Whispered comments. "Does he even know where he is?" one murmured. "He's not buying anything," another replied under their breath. Keanu heard them, but chose to remain still. He stroked his chin thoughtfully, concealing his unease. He wasn't here to make a scene. That's when someone finally approached, not another salesman, but the dealership manager. His steps deliberate, his posture rigid, his expression evaluative. As he drew closer, the tension seemed to thicken with each footfall. The manager stopped in front of Keanu, giving him a once-over before glancing at the car. "This model's extremely limited," he said, with a tone that felt more like a challenge than a welcome. "That's exactly why I'm interested," Keanu responded evenly. The manager sized him up once more, head to toe, his eyes brimming with doubt. "Well, I hope you're prepared. This vehicle isn't for just anyone." Keanu simply returned a small smile. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. What no one there realized, not the staff, not the manager, was that the man they were subtly mocking was not just another visitor. He was Keanu Reeves, known around the world not just for his films, but for his genuine kindness and quiet strength. And soon, they were about to find out. Keanu remained by the car, his eyes fixed on the elegant curves and vintage shine. He took his time, appreciating the craftsmanship, the way the light caught on the polished surface, the smooth feel of the bodywork under his fingers. It was exactly what he had envisioned. but the room felt off. Around him, an unspoken tension grew thicker. The looks. The whispers. They didn't speak directly to him, but their judgment was loud enough to be felt. Every sideways glance reinforced a silent message: "You don't belong here." Minutes passed before the manager returned, now fully composed, ready to assert himself. His name tag read Richard, and his movements were precise, like someone used to being in control. Richard approached briskly and halted near Keanu, his arms folded across his chest, a practiced smile on his face. "Interested in this model?" he asked, his voice slick with sarcasm. "It's a beautiful car," Keanu replied, cool and respectful. "I'd love to know more." Richard's gaze drifted down to Keanu's faded jacket and scuffed jeans. He raised an eyebrow, making no effort to hide his skepticism. "Huh," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Not many people get to even stand next to a model like this." He took a subtle step forward, blocking Keanu's view of the car just slightly, as if asserting ownership of the space. "This vehicle," he continued, "costs more than most houses in Beverly Hills. It's not for everyone." Keanu nodded slowly, unaffected. "I'm aware," he said evenly. "That's why I'm here." Richard laughed, short and dismissive. His eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, lowering his voice but not his contempt. "Let me put it simply," he said. "Cars like this attract a specific kind of buyer. People who understand value. People who've earned the right. You don't really fit that mold." Keanu inhaled quietly, maintaining composure, though his jaw tensed slightly. There was a shift in his stance, subtle, but unmistakable. It wasn't annoyance. It was something deeper. Something firmer. "Is that so?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. "Yes," Richard replied, his voice laced with superiority. "These cars represent more than engineering. They're about status. Prestige. Exclusivity. No offense, but judging by your outfit, I'm not sure you understand that." The words hung in the air, heavy and humiliating. Conversations elsewhere in the showroom slowed. People began to watch, pretending not to, but failing. Keanu remained silent for a beat, his gaze steady. Then, finally, he spoke. "Strange," he said, "how much you think you know about someone based only on what they're wearing. That says more about you than it does about me." Richard's face stiffened. The confidence in his smirk faltered. He leaned closer, voice now edged with quiet menace. "Listen. I see guys like you all the time. You come in, you look, you daydream, and then you walk out. No sale, just wasted time. So if you're here to pretend, I'd suggest you leave before we waste any more of mine." Keanu didn't move. But his presence changed. The calm patience in his eyes became something still and unshakable, a silent defiance. "And what if I'm not here to pretend?" he asked softly. Richard chuckled as if the idea were absurd. "Then I'd say you're in the wrong place. This place is for people who can afford what they see, and who have something to show for it. And you, my friend, don't appear to have either." A cold hush fell over the room. Keanu's expression didn't shift. But beneath it, something had hardened, not anger, but resolve. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut through the polished showroom silence. "Interesting," he said. "You talk about wealth, but the one thing this place seems to be missing is the most affordable thing of all, respect." Now, people weren't pretending not to watch. Every pair of eyes had locked onto the scene. Richard's expression twisted. His nostrils flared as he stepped in again, closing the space between them. "You think you can walk in here and lecture me?" he hissed. "You don't even know who you're talking to." Keanu's voice remained level. "And you don't know who you're judging." Richard's control slipped. He lunged forward, raising a clenched fist, more out of reflex than reason, as if trying to intimidate the man standing before him. But before he could act, Keanu moved. Not aggressively, but with startling precision. He calmly caught Richard's wrist midair, stopping the motion in place. The grip was firm, not violent. It was restraint, not retaliation. Time froze. Richard stood there, wide-eyed, stunned that his strike had been blocked so effortlessly. Around them, silence fell like a curtain. Not even the hum of the showroom lights could be heard. Keanu looked into his eyes. There was no rage there. Only an unnerving steadiness, like someone who'd seen far worse and refused to let it shape him. "The anger you're carrying, that's not mine," Keanu said, his tone even. "You might want to figure out where it's really coming from, before you keep throwing it at others." He released Richard's wrist with the same quiet grace he had stopped it. Richard staggered back, shaken, scrambling to recover his stance. Keanu adjusted his jacket, took a step away, and gave one final look toward the manager. Respect shouldn't be rare. But in this place, it seems harder to find than any of these cars. Then, without waiting for a response, he turned and began walking toward the exit. The sound of his boots on the marble floor echoed through the stunned silence. No one moved. Some stared in disbelief. Others looked down in shame. But near the far end of the showroom, one young man was frozen for a different reason. He had been filming. Quietly, without anyone noticing, he had captured the entire interaction on his phone, from the disrespectful remarks to the attempted assault. Keanu paused just long enough to meet his eyes. The young man gave a small, respectful nod. Keanu offered a barely visible smile in return, then stepped through the glass doors, and into the bright LA sunlight. What came next would shake everything. Inside the dealership, the silence hung heavy. Richard, visibly shaken, stood still behind the counter, trying to mask his unease. But it was too late. Every employee, every customer, even those pretending not to stare, had witnessed what had unfolded. And then, the silence was broken. Not by words, but by the ripple that began moments after Keanu stepped out. The young man's video, quietly filmed from the side of the showroom, was already on its way to the internet. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Shared across social media, the footage quickly exploded. What started as a quiet incident became a wildfire of outrage. Millions watched as a humble man, one of Hollywood's most respected actors, was insulted and nearly assaulted by a man blinded by ego. People were stunned. The video captured it all. Richard dismissing Keanu. The mocking tone. The smug comments. And finally, that moment when the manager tried to strike him, only to be stopped mid-motion with calm, almost meditative precision. But it wasn't just the action that moved people. It was the line. Respect shouldn't be rare. But in this place, it seems harder to find than any of these cars. That quote, quiet and honest, became a global echo. It popped up on memes, captions, news tickers, even graffiti. It was a line that struck deep. Comments flooded in from every corner of the world. How can anyone treat Keanu Reeves like that? The most humble man in Hollywood, and this is how he's treated? Keanu is pure class, handled that with grace. Respect. That manager? Embarrassment to customer service. Blogs, news anchors, talk shows, everyone had something to say. It was no longer just about one rude employee. It was about something much bigger, the culture of elitism, the prejudice behind expensive suits, and the misplaced idea that worth could be measured in wallets. And the dealership? It felt the backlash almost instantly. Its social pages were bombarded. Thousands demanded answers. Reviews dropped to rock bottom. Boycotts were organized, with influencers and celebrities calling the place out by name. We Stand with Keanu became a movement, a digital uprising against arrogance masked as luxury. Richard, now the center of international fury, issued a public apology. But it backfired. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding. That he hadn't recognized Mr. Reeves. That his actions were misread. But the internet wasn't buying it. To many, it wasn't just about Keanu. It was about every person who had ever been sized up by what they wore, judged by what they could afford, or ignored because of their appearance. This incident had become a mirror, and people didn't like what they saw in their reflection. Former employees began to speak out anonymously. Richard's always been like this. He judged everyone. Didn't matter who you were unless you flashed money. These testimonies only deepened the fallout. Clients pulled their accounts. Sales dipped sharply. The dealership's brand, once associated with luxury and power, now screamed arrogance and humiliation. Their phones stopped ringing. Their doors stopped swinging. And inside, panic replaced polish. Through all of this, Keanu said nothing. He didn't post. He didn't give interviews. He didn't fuel the fire. He stayed home, in the quiet, modest space he always returned to, and reflected. For him, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing a man for losing control. It was about something deeper, the everyday injustices people face, the silent prejudices that creep into professional spaces, and the chance to make a moment matter. Talking with a close friend over coffee, Keanu shared what he'd been thinking. The video's out there. People are reacting. But I don't want it to just end with outrage, he said quietly. His friend leaned in. So what will you do? Keanu looked down at his cup, thoughtful. Then smiled faintly. I'll handle it my way. He knew exactly what that meant. He would return, not to settle a score, but to turn that experience into something meaningful. A quiet gesture. A public example. Something that would last longer than the trending tags. He also hadn't forgotten the car. The one that had sparked this all. It still lived in his thoughts, not just for its design, but now as a symbol of what this moment had become. And with that, his decision was made. It was time to go back. A few days had passed, but the video still dominated headlines and timelines. Keanu Reeves remained a trending name, yet not a single word had come from him. No statements. No interviews. No reactive post. But something was coming. That afternoon, without warning or entourage, Keanu walked once again through the very doors where it all began. No bodyguards. No cameras. Just him, moving with quiet resolve. This time, the atmosphere inside the dealership had drastically changed. The once lively showroom was now eerily still. A few staff members moved slowly and awkwardly, their eyes darting away as soon as they saw him. Where there had been arrogance before, now there was tension, tight, uncomfortable, and silent. Everyone knew who he was. Richard stood behind the main counter, pale and visibly rattled. The confidence he once wore like armor was gone. His back was straighter, but his eyes held uncertainty. The backlash had left its mark. Keanu ignored the stares and walked straight to the car, the same model he had admired days ago. He ran his hand gently across its hood, his fingers tracing the line of the body like he was feeling the soul of the machine. It still fascinated him. Still meant something. But the tension wasn't in the car, it was in the air. Richard hesitated, then finally gathered the courage to approach. His steps were slower now, careful. Gone was the smirk. Gone was the sarcasm. He looked smaller. Mr. Reeves, Richard began, voice quiet and uncertain. I wanted to say I'm sorry for the way things unfolded. I think we got off on the wrong foot. If you're still interested, I'd be honored to show you the car properly. Keanu turned his head slowly. His gaze met Richard's. The manager immediately looked away, struggling to hold it. Start over? Keanu asked. His voice was soft, but it carried weight. Richard nodded quickly, almost desperately. Yes, sir. I hope we can put it behind us. Keanu's voice didn't rise. It never did. But his words hit like iron. This isn't just about how you treated me, he said calmly. It's about how you treat people. Richard opened his mouth as if to respond, but the words didn't come. Keanu took a small step back, never breaking eye contact. Respect isn't something you offer to select people based on what they were or how much money they have. It's a standard. You either live by it, or you don't. The entire room was still. Even the ticking of a nearby clock felt louder in the silence. I came here looking for something special, Keanu continued. Something that had meaning. But what I found can't be fixed with an apology. That's why I won't be purchasing this car. Not from here. The weight of that sentence landed like a final gavel strike. Richard stood frozen, face tightening with humiliation. His voice cracked as he tried to explain, but Keanu lifted a hand gently, signaling he wasn't interested in excuses. This should be a moment of reflection, Keanu said, his voice echoing through the vast hall. Not just for you, but for everyone here. He turned toward the exit. But just before walking away, he looked back over his shoulder. Real luxury isn't found in price tags or chrome badges. It's in the way we treat one another. And right now, that seems rarer than anything parked in this showroom. Then, without a single glance more, Keanu walked out, calm, composed, and carrying a message far greater than any purchase. In the days that followed, the story didn't fade, it evolved. The viral video, now seen by millions, had become more than just a moment of confrontation. It had turned into a cultural reflection. People weren't just sharing it, they were talking about it, dissecting it, learning from it. But what resonated most wasn't the drama, it was the way Keanu responded. The quiet restraint. The steady presence. The powerful message delivered without anger. And now, that message was spreading. People began to tell their own stories, tales of judgment based on clothes, accent, appearance. Hashtags emerged like wildflowers, hashtag respect is luxury, hashtag learn from Keanu, hashtag true class. Each tag carried with it 1,000 voices, echoing the same theme: dignity should never be optional. The media couldn't get enough. News anchors praised Keanu's composure. Talk shows debated the deeper issues it raised. Celebrities reposted the video with captions like, "This is how you handle hate with honor." Keanu shows us again what real power looks like. Even high-end brands started to sweat. Luxury car companies quietly reviewed their sales team protocols. Internal memos were issued with phrases like inclusive image review and public perception emergency. The original dealership, meanwhile, was in freefall. Within a week, major clients had walked away. Longtime customers canceled future orders. Shareholders demanded accountability. And eventually, the moment everyone anticipated arrived, Richard was fired. His termination wasn't presented with fanfare. It came in a quiet press release, buried beneath layers of corporate apology. But the public didn't miss it. Former employees, feeling emboldened, spoke out once more. "This wasn't the first time," said one. "He made everyone feel small," said another. "The sad part? We got used to it." Despite internal restructuring, the damage was deep. The dealership's name was now synonymous with arrogance. For them, this was no longer a PR problem. It was a legacy problem. While all this unfolded, Keanu remained silent, publicly, at least. No interviews. No statements. No victory laps. Instead, he quietly walked into a different dealership. This one wasn't lavish. It wasn't famous. It was tucked on the edge of town, owned by a kind-faced man named Sam. The windows weren't tinted, the floor wasn't marble, but the air inside was warm. Welcoming. The moment Keanu entered, Sam greeted him with a smile that didn't judge. "Good afternoon," he said. "Anything I can help you find?" "I'm looking for something special," Keanu replied. "A car with purpose, something we can use to do some good." There was no recognition in Sam's face at first. No gasp. No fuss. Just professional kindness. That was the difference. Keanu browsed the modest collection, talked openly, and found a car that matched what he had envisioned. Not because of its exclusivity, but because of the intention it could carry. Before leaving, Keanu took a photo with Sam and his small team. Later that day, he posted the image on social media. His caption was short, but powerful. "True luxury is respect. Thank you for reminding me." It exploded. The post went viral just like the video, but this time, it brought light. People shared it with pride. customers flooded Sam's dealership. People were inspired, not enraged. Keanu's gesture had become a ripple of real change. From Tokyo to Toronto, stories began to emerge, people sharing moments of bias they had experienced in stores, cafes, offices. But they weren't just complaining, they were rallying. Campaigns were launched. Small businesses posted signs saying, "Everyone deserves dignity. Respect is not for sale." Even luxury brands, usually silent in such matters, issued awkward but well-meaning statements. Some promised training. Others donated to causes supporting inclusion and equality. They had seen the fire and didn't want to be the next dealership burned. But through it all, Keanu never made it about himself. In a rare conversation with a journalist who caught him outside a coffee shop, he was asked how he felt about the impact. His response was simple. "I never wanted to be the headline. I just wanted to remind people that who you are matters more than what you wear." He added, "Respect isn't a privilege. It's a human right." And the car? The one he had purchased from Sam's shop? It didn't stay with him long. Keanu had it restored, not in a flashy, showy way, but with careful attention to every detail. Once completed, he donated it to a charity auction raising funds for inclusion initiatives. The event drew in people from all over the country. When it came time to speak, Keanu stood quietly on the small stage. He held the microphone gently, paused, then said, "This car was just metal and paint, until a lesson gave it value. Now, it's a reminder that how we treat each other can define everything. Thank you for helping that message travel further." The audience rose in applause, not for the car, not even for the man, but for the truth he had just spoken aloud. What began as a moment of discrimination inside a glass showroom had now become a movement. One rooted not in rage, but in restoration. Keanu Reeves didn't just walk out that day. He walked forward. And the world followed. News of the auction spread far beyond Hollywood. What had started as a quiet act of resistance had now become something more, a blueprint for how to respond to disrespect with purpose. The vintage car Keanu donated, the same model that had once sat under cold fluorescent lights in a place of judgment, now stood under soft golden spotlights at a fundraising event filled with warmth, humanity, and meaning. It sold for millions. But the real reward wasn't money. It was the message. The car, once a symbol of elitism and exclusion, had been transformed into a vehicle for change, literally and metaphorically. The proceeds were directed to organizations that promoted equal treatment in education, business, and customer service industries. Charities that fought discrimination. Youth programs that encouraged compassion over competition. Workshops that taught respect as a professional skill, not a luxury. Across the world, conversations continued. In online forums, people discussed their own moments of being dismissed for not looking the part. In schools, teachers used the video in Keanu's speech as a lesson in humility. In workplaces, new guidelines were introduced, encouraging staff to treat every client, every person, with equal dignity. The wave kept building. Luxury brands who had once thrived on exclusivity now scrambled to rebrand themselves as inclusive. Marketing teams replaced cold glamour with warm sincerity. Photo shoots shifted focus from wealth to connection. Meanwhile, the dealership where it all began struggled to stay afloat. Despite their late apologies and attempts to hire new staff, the damage was irreversible. No viral ad could erase what had been caught on camera, or the thousands of screenshots and reaction videos that kept spreading. Their online reviews remained brutal. Their inventory sat untouched. Their name had become a cautionary tale. And Richard? He faded into silence. The man who once controlled a showroom now avoided public spaces. No company wanted to associate with someone whose name had become synonymous with arrogance. His attempt to issue one last public statement fell flat, viewed more as damage control than remorse. People didn't want excuses. They wanted accountability. In contrast, Keanu continued to lead by quiet example. He never sought credit. He never reminded the world of what he'd done. But his actions echoed louder than any speech. One evening, during a small interview at a humanitarian award event, he was asked again how he remained so composed during the initial confrontation. His response was simple, and it silenced the room. "I wasn't protecting myself from a punch. I was protecting someone else from becoming the kind of person who throws one." The crowd didn't cheer, they just sat in reverent stillness, absorbing the weight of what he'd said. Soon after, the clip made its way online and added another chapter to the growing movement. People began writing on walls, painting murals, wearing shirts that read, "Protect others from becoming cruel. Respond with calm, not silence. Dignity is louder than rage." Keanu never claimed to be a hero. But in a world that so often rewards loudness, he had chosen stillness, and that stillness had moved millions. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the kid in a small town who'd been refused to look at a sports car because of his clothes. The woman at a luxury boutique who'd been ignored until someone recognized her. The older man in line who had been skipped over simply because he wasn't flashy enough. Keanu's moment had opened a door, and now, others were walking through. As the public conversation deepened, people stopped focusing on the dealership itself. The real story had shifted. What captured hearts and headlines now was the quiet integrity of one man who refused to meet cruelty with anger. Keanu's decision not to buy the car, not out of spite, but principle, had become a symbol in itself. For him, it had never been about punishing anyone. He simply believed that if you allowed disrespect to go unchallenged, you allowed it to grow. But what truly inspired people wasn't his restraint. It was what he did after. He didn't turn the moment into a personal victory. He didn't cash in on the attention. Instead, he redirected it. He elevated the conversation. And he did it the way he always had, with action, not noise. He helped organize a national campaign that partnered with small, values-driven businesses, local cafes, neighborhood garages, family-run shops, celebrating places where people were treated equally, no matter what they wore or what they drove. The initiative was called the Respect Drive. Its motto was simple. The way you treat someone says more about your service than anything you sell. Billboards began to appear in cities, not with Keanu's face, but with scenes of baristas smiling at customers, salespeople helping without judgment, and children being greeted with warmth in unexpected places. Even major brands took note, reshaping their customer training models. The phrase "you never know who you're talking to" became a mantra in retail circles. More importantly, the public began holding businesses accountable in real time. All of this happened because of one quiet moment, and one man who could have walked away, but didn't. Meanwhile, the car Keanu had purchased from Sam's humble dealership had undergone a full restoration. But instead of keeping it, he announced something unexpected. He would auction it off, not for profit, but for purpose. At a modest charity event in Los Angeles, under a string of lights and in front of a modest crowd, Keanu took the stage. He wore no suit. No tie. Just the same jacket and jeans he'd been judged for weeks earlier. He stood beside the fully restored car and spoke briefly. "This car started as a symbol of rejection," he said. "But now, it represents the opposite, what happens when we choose respect over reaction. When we respond with something better." He paused for a moment, letting the silence breathe. "This isn't about me. It never was. It's about how we treat each other, especially when we think no one's watching." Applause didn't erupt right away. It came slowly, quietly, rising like a wave of realization. The car was sold for a staggering amount, the winning bidder pledging to never drive it, only display it as a reminder of the lesson behind it. The proceeds funded programs focused on inclusion, training, and dignity-first customer service. Schools received donations. Small businesses got grants to improve accessibility. A scholarship fund was created for underprivileged students interested in ethical business studies. Every penny went toward planting seeds of change. Back at Sam's dealership, the place where Keanu had been welcomed without assumptions, business had never been better. People traveled from other cities just to shake Sam's hand. To buy from someone who saw value in humanity before credit scores. Sam, when interviewed, said, I didn't do anything special. I just treated him like a person. Turns out, that was the most special thing anyone could have done. The world kept moving, but something had shifted. The ripples from that one moment in a luxury dealership had reached far beyond what anyone expected. In classrooms, children talked about the Keanu story during empathy lessons. In training rooms, corporate staff watched the footage as part of emotional intelligence workshops. In homes, families shared the story as a reminder to treat everyone, from janitors to CEOs, with the same basic respect. Keanu never once tried to own the movement. He stayed in the background, allowing the message to shine while he remained its quiet carrier. In a rare interview months later, a journalist asked him, "Why didn't you fight back when he insulted you? When he tried to hit you?" Keanu's answer was simple. "Because I didn't want to win over him. I wanted to win over what he represented." That quote, like so many others from the event, took off across social media. It was printed on posters, used in leadership seminars, and quoted by influencers and activists alike. Some even began calling the movement the Keanu Code, a term used to describe handling disrespect with grace, staying grounded under fire, and choosing humility over ego. And in that code, there were 3 unspoken rules. Don't judge anyone by what they wear. Don't confuse money with value. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Meanwhile, Richard, the former manager, faded into near obscurity. He had been fired soon after the incident, and despite several efforts to rebrand himself professionally, the shadow of that one video followed him everywhere. At first, he blamed the world for turning against him. But over time, something in him broke open. In a quiet blog post, years later, written under a pseudonym, a man claiming to be Richard wrote, "I used to think luxury meant power. That the more expensive something was, the more it defined who I was. But the most expensive lesson I ever learned was that respect isn't something you can sell, it's something you have to live." No one could confirm it was him. But those who had worked at the dealership read it, and knew. As for Keanu, he continued on with his life, filming movies, supporting causes, quietly donating to hospitals and shelters as he always had. But now, everywhere he went, there was a different kind of recognition. Not for his roles. Not for his fame. For the way he had handled a situation that could have gone very differently. And for what that had sparked in others. In Tokyo, a luxury store began a campaign centered on inclusivity, inspired by the story. In Nairobi, a youth mentorship program was launched named Project Dignity. In Rio, a mechanic shop hung a poster of Keanu above its entrance with the words, "Here, we don't judge. We serve." Even cities in Europe began hosting Respect Weeks, encouraging businesses to lead with empathy, not appearance. All of it traced back to one thing. Not a speech. Not a protest. Not a dramatic outburst. Just a man in a leather jacket, who chose kindness when the world expected conflict. Time passed. The viral firestorm cooled, the headlines moved on, and the digital world found new stories to chase. But the lesson remained. Some stories don't fade because they aren't built on noise, they're built on truth. And Keanu's story was one of them. Across industries, quiet changes began to take root. Luxury brands redesigned their training programs. Corporate offices added mandatory dignity seminars. And independent stores, the kind of places that rarely made news, started sharing their own moments of grace, tagging each other with #RespectIsLuxury, each post a tribute to the shift Keanu had helped spark. His act of restraint, one moment of silent strength, had blossomed into thousands of acts of conscious kindness across the globe. And Keanu? He never tried to own it. Instead, he kept living the same way he always had, walking through grocery stores unnoticed, greeting fans without entourage, and finding moments of peace in simple acts of connection. The car he had purchased, restored and auctioned, now sat inside a museum exhibit titled The Human Turn. The space wasn't flashy. There was no velvet rope. No glass wall. Just a quiet room with soft lights, a bench, and a small plaque. It read, "This car began as an object. It became a mirror. And then, it became a message. Next to it, visitors could leave handwritten notes on a wall called Moments of Dignity. Some wrote about times they were treated unfairly. Others wrote about the moment they realized they had judged someone too quickly. And many, young, old, rich, and struggling, simply wrote thank you. Sam, the humble dealership owner who had treated Keanu like any other person, became a local figure of respect. He turned down sponsorships and refused to expand. He said, "The moment I turn this into a brand, I'll forget what made it matter." Instead, he put up a wooden sign above his door. It said, "Everyone belongs here." Keanu quietly visited him once more. No cameras. No press. They shared coffee under the sunlight just outside the shop. "You know," Sam said with a smile, "I think that car was never about the car." Keanu nodded. "Yeah. It was always about what we drive forward." The sun had just started to dip when Keanu stood on a small community stage in a quiet neighborhood park, not far from where the story had begun. No spotlight. No red carpet. Just a small wooden platform, folding chairs, and string lights swaying in the breeze. The event wasn't publicized. It wasn't even about him. It was a local fundraiser for youth empowerment, a cause now connected to the proceeds from the car's auction. Families gathered, kids ran barefoot across the grass, and neighbors brought food wrapped in foil. Keanu stood behind a modest podium, holding a single piece of paper. He didn't read from it. He simply looked out at the small group and spoke like he had always lived, without drama, without ego, but with purpose. "I was once told that real wealth isn't about what you can buy, it's about what you leave behind," he said. "And sometimes, the most valuable thing you can give someone is the feeling that they matter." He paused and scanned the quiet crowd. That day in the dealership, it wasn't about me. It was about the way we measure worth. The way we decide who belongs, and who doesn't. And the way we forget that respect doesn't come from money or suits or cars. It comes from choice. A young boy in the front row looked up at him, eyes wide. Keanu smiled. "And the truth is," he continued, "you never know who someone is, or who they're going to become. But if you treat them like they already matter, they'll carry that forever." There was no applause at first. Just a long, heartfelt silence, the kind that comes from people feeling something real. Then, one by one, hands came together. Not in thunderous claps, but in warm appreciation. Later that night, Keanu sat on a nearby bench as the park emptied out. He didn't speak. He didn't pose for pictures. He just sat beneath the swaying lights, looking at the stars breaking through the sky. Nearby, a teenage girl approached him cautiously. She had watched the viral video months ago and followed the movement quietly ever since. "I just wanted to say," she whispered, "you changed the way I see people." Keanu looked at her and nodded. "Then that's all that matters." She left. And he remained on the bench, the breeze gently tugging at his jacket, a soft smile resting on his face, not of triumph, but of peace. In the weeks that followed, no new scandal erupted, no dramatic follow-up occurred. Just people, changing. Slowly. Quietly. For the better. A man once dismissed for how he looked had reminded the world that the way we treat others defines not just them, but us. And while the world kept spinning, the lesson lingered. Respect doesn't cost a thing. But when given freely, it's the most valuable gift in the world.